Welcome to the Historian's Eye podcast for Jackson Spielvogel's Western Civ textbook, 10th edition. Chapter 3, The Civilization of the Greeks. Like the ancient Hebrews, the Greek also had a profound influence on Western civilization. Unlike the river valleys of the Middle East, however, Greece is a mountainous land, with human occupation generally occurring in the narrow valleys. The soil was poor in most locations, and the people of Greece early turned to the seas, notably the Aegean Sea. The first civilization in the region was a non-Greek society centered on the island of Crete. During the 3rd millennium BCE, the Cretans, or Minoans, from the legendary King Minos, traded throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Commerce and art, rather than military conquest, governed the Minoans, and those practices are reflected in the wall frescoes at Knossos and elsewhere. However, about 1450 BCE, its civilization was destroyed, perhaps by a natural disaster followed by military conquest by the Greek-speaking peoples of the mainland. The earliest Greek speakers, who are Indo-Europeans, migrated into Greece about 1900 BCE, and by about 1600 BCE had established the first Greek or Mycenaean civilization from one of its major cities, Mycenae. More warlike than the Minoans, the Mycenaeans dominated the Aegean world and beyond until their civilization collapsed during the 12th century BCE, possibly from invasions by new Greek speakers from the north. A dark age resulted. Civilization declined, an era covered by the stories of Homer's epic poems, which established the heroic values of later Greek society. From the end of the Dark Age, about 750 BCE, the era of the polis, or city-state, began. Most numbered a few thousand persons, although Athens at its height reached about 250,000. The polis was a community of citizens, and the citizens, at least male citizens, ruled the state. A military revolution also broadened polis participation. Farmers fighting as heavily armed infantrymen, or hoplites, so called for the hoplon, or the shield that they carried into battle, replaced the aristocratic cavalry, and consequently received, sometimes grudgingly, a say in the governing of the polis. The growing armies filled with citizen soldiers and the increase of democracy is not an accident or coincidence. The poli also expanded during this period through the colonization and increased trade. Two of the most famous city-states were Sparta, a militarized polis ruled by an oligarchy, and where commerce and the arts were minimized in favor of military power, and Athens, which became noted for its democratic institutions, in spite of the fact that, like other poli, slaves and women had no political rights. War was endemic, and the poli rarely united until the Persians invaded Greece. The Persian Wars from 499 to 479 BCE temporarily unified the Greeks, who were victorious against the powerful Persian Empire. At the end of the wars, Athens created the anti-Persian Delian League, but Athens converted the alliance into an empire. In reaction, Sparta created its own Peloponnesian League. Eventually, war broke out in the resulting Peloponnesian War from 431 to 404 BCE. The Greek world suffered disastrously, with Athens eventually losing the war. In the 4th century BCE, Philip II of Macedonia took control of Greece. The 5th and 4th centuries were the classical eras of Greece, especially in Athens. Herodotus and Thucydides can be said to have created history as a systematic analysis of past events. Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides became the founders of tragic drama, and Aristophanes the father of dramatic comedy. The ideals of Greek art and architecture, as in the Pantheon, have survived to the present, as has the Hippocratic Oath that all doctors take. Rational and critical thought developed, and philosophers such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle posed questions about humanity and nature still being debated today. Religion and myth were important to most Greeks. The gods dwelt on Mount Olympus. Games and festivals were held in their honor, and oracles were consulted. notably at Delphi. However, unlike the Hebrews, gods began to diminish as a source of knowledge, truth, and morality in favor of philosophy, history, and experiment. Just as the Greeks shifted rule from god-kings to rule by people, so too did learning and knowledge shift from the divine sources to man-made ones. Ancient Greece was no utopia, as slavery, poverty, repression of women, and violence were often the norm. But as the text notes, its civilization was the fountainhead of Western culture.